Hello, welcome to the Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 3, Diverse Logic of Theory Building. And our topic is how to test a hypothesis. For setting up hypothesis testing research, we must first have a theory because the nature of the proposed relationship is ultimately derived from theory. A theory provides the basic logic of relationship between different phenomena. The hypotheses are generated to test the truth of these relationships and therefore the correctness of the logical process, namely the theory that has generated them. Every hypothesis contains a statement about the relationship between at least two phenomena. One of them is the phenomena such as female infanticide that the researcher is trying to account for. The other is one that is thought to affect or bring about the phenomena that one is trying to account for. The first one is called the dependent variable and the second one is called an independent variable. For example, if we put forward the hypothesis that illiteracy of mothers leads to female infanticide, then female infanticide is the dependent variable and the literacy level of mothers is the independent variable. To test the hypothesis, one has to expose it to a situation that can show it be false. If the hypothesis survives the effort to falsify it, then it is proved true. In the above example, we can study the rate of female infanticide among a population of well-educated women. If the sample shows a significant rate of female infanticide that compares favorably with the corresponding sample of illiterate women, then the hypothesis is false. In other words, the literacy of women is not a significant variable as far as female infanticide is concerned. If, on the other hand, the sample of educated women shows a significant drop in the incidence of female infanticide, then the hypothesis is tentatively proven. In the above example, one could rely on statistical to provide most of the base data, but not all social science variables are measured statistically. For that, one has to measure by deductive processes and set up some criteria oneself or rely upon criteria provided by the other studies. Let us now do the exercise of reflection to work out the links between the variables and the theories. After the exercise, we will discuss the common methods of testing a hypothesis. Now the point is common methods of testing a hypothesis. Here we discuss the following three common methods of testing the hypothesis. The first is pre-testing of the post-testing paradigm. One common method of testing a hypothesis is by pre-testing of the post-testing paradigm. You may ask, what is a paradigm? To continue with our discussion of pre-testing, one simply studies the field prior to the introduction of a variable, and after its introduction, let us say the study of a village, after the building of a road, or after an event like an election or epidemic. However, the dangers of such a paradigm is that one is not sure about the variable under consideration being responsible for the transformations, and there is always the problem of extraneous factor. For example of this kind of before and after studies. Now let us move to the point static group comparison paradigm. In the static group comparison paradigm, instead of studying the same field situation before and after, one compares two similar field situations, one with and the other without the introduction of independent variable. For example, one may have two identical neighboring villages, but one gets access to television and the other does not. So one may study the effect of television viewing by comparing the villages. Does this example remind us of Scarlett Epstein work cited earlier? Now the third point is non-equivalent control group paradigm. In the non-equivalent control group paradigm, one compares one field situation before and after the introduction of an independent variable, but also compares it with a field in which the variable has not been introduced, but which is similar in all other respects. This would be the case, say for example, when one had two identical villages that were both studied and then one of them received a significant input like a school. But both schools were again studied to see what effect the school had. But now we can compare it by measuring against the village that did not receive the school. The most common source of error here would be that some sort of selection process has already taken place for the introduction of the external variable. For example, a particular population size or caste composition may be responsible for the fact that one village received a school and the other did not. To remove the possibility of such an error, a fourth paradigm may be taken recourse to, and this is called the non-equivalent control group paradigm. Here everything is like the third paradigm situation, except that the field situations are chosen and at random and not selectively. However, this also depends on the possibility of having such random selection. That is, if there are enough field situations of the similar type, whether the researcher has access to selection of any such field situation. One can have such a paradigm when the number of situations is many and equally available. Say, if one were to study the effects of introduction of computers in secondary schools in Delhi, the most obvious disadvantage of random sampling is that one may not get the desired result. In fact, such methods are more useful for quantitative research, like the school example cited. Let us move to the next point, sensitivity to alternative explanation. One fact that must be kept in mind while doing research and using the various paradigms discussed is that as social scientists, one must be sensitive to the existence of alternative explanations, even if one has proven the hypothesis. Rigidity is not a virtue, because social science research of real life situations is complex and multifaceted. Now the next point is rival hypothesis construction. The process of rival hypothesis construction is a standard procedure to test the efficacy of research. The four factors that form the basis of the four major rival hypotheses are the effects of selection, reactive measurement effects, the effects of uncontrolled extraneous variable, and interaction effects involving selection. Let us discuss each of the four factors. First is the effects of selection. A selection effect occurs whenever the treatment group or the group we are studying for the introduction of the variable is different from the comparison group because of the way in which they were selected or rejected for introduction of the particular variable, like for example school. The advantages that may be perceived as emanating from the school may be because the number of persons of a dominant caste or class is more in the particular village, and the school may have been introduced because of the greater clout of the dominant caste members. So it is class advantage that may have already been there, and not merely the introduction of the school that may be perceived in the study as better hygiene consciousness or better use of medical facilities, etc. Now the second is the reactive measurement effects. The second rival hypothesis situation may occur when the measurement process itself may introduce transformations in the field. Like for example, as it often happens when students from Delhi go to carry out field-based social research in villages, the perception of the villages of the urban elite or middle class to which the students may belong often affects the responses and sometimes even the behavior pattern. The villagers might, for example, wear more the urban clothes, while the researchers are around or profess greater faith in modern medicine. The third one is the effect of uncontrolled extraneous variable. The third type of error is due to the introduction of uncontrolled extraneous variable. That is, those variables that were overlooked or that entered while the research was in progress. And fourth is interaction effects involving selection. The fourth type of error occurs when the selection process and extraneous variable both occur in conjunction. Our discussion of hypothesis testing is a process that takes the researcher a step forward in the investigation. It is an example of the organized skepticism of science. In other words, you may say that this reflects the rejection of any statement without empirical verification. A number of works have been based on the processes of hypothesis testing, and several middle-range theories have emerged as a result of such inductive analysis. One good example is the work of Robert Martin on the American soldiers, in which he had developed the theory of latent and manifest functions. The efforts to produce a rigorous theoretical analysis in the social sciences is, however, always met with skepticism, as the results rarely are able to attain the status of laws. But middle-range theories like that of Merton cited above can be quite effective in explaining, if not predicting, social behavior. Now let us move to the next point, the use and scope of social science theory. A very significant aspect of social science research is that this research itself is often instrumental in changing human behavior. If human beings are made aware of destructive or potentially disruptive behavior, then they can and do make conscious efforts to change it. In this way, the subjects and objects of study in the social sciences have a dynamic, interactive relationship. For example, if certain kinds of child rearing practices are shown to be harmful, for the normal development of the child, then they may be arguably modified or abandoned. Any predictions made by the study on the ill effects of a particular practice may be reversed during the course of research itself. Moreover, a lot of research in sociology and anthropology has been directed towards revealing what has been variously called latent functions or unintended consequences of human actions. However, once made public, these do not remain latent or unintended, and may in fact replace the earlier ways of thinking by the actors themselves. For example, in urban India, marriage is by and large not considered a religious or sacred ceremony to the extent that it was believed to be a generation back. More people would point to it as an occasion to bring the family together, or to cement social relationships, or to increase social solidarity, a function of marriage that in the earlier time was perhaps more visible to the social analysts than to the actors themselves. Many scholars now consider it possible that the subjective dimension of human behavior, like moods, dispositions, emotions, and values, are open to sensory perception and therefore form part of externally observable data. The conclusions that we reach regarding such subjects are based either on the information given to us by the actors or by a process of empathetic understanding, where the scholar tries to get into the place of the actor. Rosaldo, in his article The Range of the Headhunter, puts himself in the place of the headhunter to analyze the anguish that is felt at the death of a loved one, at the loss of his wife, Michelle Rosaldo. Thus, the social scientist interprets the action in terms of subjective experiences as a human being and being subject to the same emotions and motivations as any other. On the other hand, it is also realized that one need not step mentally into the shoes of the actors to understand a phenomena. For example, one need not be suicidal at any point of time to do the sociological analysis of the suicide. But there is certainly a qualitative difference between the kind of analysis that looks at the phenomena from the outside and more reflexive kind of descriptive work. Not all types of human behavior are subjective, and there are many concrete and visible outcomes of behavior that can be measured and studied. An alternate manner of constructing theory came from the behaviorist, who rejected the vagueness implied in subjective understanding. An extreme behaviorist position may deny all subjective and internal mental conditions, but most prefer a modified version. Here, the introspective data from subjects is treated as data and then subjected to analysis. This is similar to the approach where contradictory inputs by the various actors in the field are analyzed as data that represent the conditions of the field, like different power positions occupied by the actors or conflicting identities. At this point in our discussion, we need to also look at question: how do values held by researchers affect theory building? In our next discussion. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the self-learning podcasts.